And I just hope that we realize that we can't keep hearing these messages. We can't keep having conferences. We've got to become active, and we've got to start actively promoting pro-life in all the different areas of our country. What have you been doing in the past year? We've got an example of one doctor who refused to perform abortions, and he was stopped by the HPCSA, and about 8 years later, he was allowed to start practicing as a doctor. There should be many, many more like that. We appreciate the fact that you are here. You bless us, and we feel humbled by your traveling all the way to come here. So our next speaker is Mr. Brad Mattis, a brother that I've known for many years, and in his very humble CV, I think it will become clear to you the experience that he's had in fighting for the cause of pro-life in the USA. With 40 years of significant contribution and recognition in the pro-life movement, Brad Mattis is widely known in the United States and worldwide for his passion for the sanctity of life, from the newborn to end of life. Currently serving as president of Life Issues Institute, Brad was co-founder of the organization along with a pro-life pioneer, Dr. John C. Willke, in 1991. But Dr. Willke was one of the fathers, if not the father, of the pro-life movement, because he started fighting in 1973, the Roe versus Wade case already, but maybe you'll hear more about that from Brad. He's heard on over 1,200 outlets nationwide. Brad is a commentator for the Daily Life Issues program. Brad also serves as president of the International Right to Life Federation and was formerly assistant director of the National Right to Life Political Action Committee, and served as president of several state right to life organizations. With a master's degree in biblical studies and biblical counseling, Brad is also a counselor to men who have lost a child to abortion. He was the first one to identify the existence of this phenomenon, that men were involved indirectly or directly with their girlfriends or wives having had abortion and suffering from post-abortion syndrome. He was the first one to bring this to the attention of the world. He's a family man at heart. Brad and his wife Ellen have 4 grown sons and 5 grandchildren. The Montana natives now reside in Florida. So can I ask you to put your hands together for Mr. Brad Mattis.
So first of all, we need to make clear, which I'm sure you probably all agree with me on this point, that chemical abortion does not empower women. Actually, it does the opposite, because it makes her the abortionist. It is she who is doing that act of killing to her own body, which is a heavier burden emotionally after she has that abortion. It turns her home, namely usually her bathroom, bedroom, into an abortion chamber. And in her home, that is a trigger point that she cannot get away from. Every day, she goes into her bathroom or her bedroom where the killing process ensued. and sometimes it is very graphic and difficult to deal with. She is reminded of that. And one of the most difficult things is she sees her baby. Now, keep in mind that the Planned Parenthoods and the abortion facilities around America and around the world tell women, oh, it's a more natural process. It's almost painless. It's like a heavy period. And it's not a baby. You just pass a glob of tissue. Well, women are learning firsthand when they pass that baby, usually in their bathrooms. They hold in their hands a highly defined, tiny little infant or developing unborn baby infant. If they see the fingers and toes, they see the eyes, they realize they've been lied to by the abortion industry. They realize it's too late to go back. And she must dispose of this baby's body. Dr. Christina Francis, who is head of a pro-life organization of OBGYNs in America, said that at her practice, she is getting many calls from women totally distraught. That they see their baby, they have their baby, and they don't know what to do with their baby's bodies. In many cases, women have told me they put their head down. They can't look at me when they say that they flush their baby down the toilet. We have seen actual issues of problems with babies' bodies in the sewer systems and clogging up the sewer systems, which is a horrific thing to deal with. Now, I want to introduce you to Elizabeth Gillette. I sat down and did a full-length half-hour program on chemical abortion. And I wanted people who watch it to understand what chemical abortion actually does to women.
It's coming. No idea.
Take us through the chemical abortion process. What did you experience?
At first, nothing. And then the cramping started. And it was deep and very, very painful. I've had 3 children since then, and it felt like labor. I miscarried my entire child. Whole. It was the size of a tennis ball, probably. Round. Just a perfect little sack. And inside was this tiny little gummy bear. And I held him.
It's a hard memory to live with, isn't it? Did they tell you about the emotional, the psychological ramifications?
No. The doctor had promised me that I would feel relieved. I didn't feel any relief.
What did you feel?
Overwhelming guilt. Just a sickness inside that I couldn't put away. Nightmares started shortly after. I stopped eating. I became anorexic. I was later diagnosed with acute post-traumatic stress disorder.
Just part of the interview I had with her. If you'd like to see the whole thing and also hear from Tammy Morris, you can go to lifeissues.org and click on the area for chemical abortion and hear more of her story. It is absolutely horrific what many of these women are going through. Not to mention the pain and the profuse bleeding, but the reality of coming face to face with losing your child. And we're going to talk about the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in America, the almighty government system in America. And they approved chemical abortion pills whose sole purpose is to kill an unborn child. They ignored their own research when they approved RU46 in the year 2000. It was a political and a very sloppy job of approving a drug. But the research that they pushed aside and ignored requires multiple in-person doctor visits. And establishes the exact age of a woman's unborn child, and limited use to no more than 7 weeks. They also ruled out an ectopic pregnancy. That is a pregnancy outside of the womb, because that can be deadly. And it provided a thorough briefing for the women taking these pills, a very thorough system. And the FDA has just kicked women to the curb by getting rid of all of these protections for women and allowing them to be mailed to women where we don't know what the contents of those pills are. They have not been inspected. They're coming from countries like China and India, where we don't have any quality control. Now, Dr. David Elia, I'm probably butchering how the French will pronounce that name. He is a highly respected and renowned French researcher on RU46. And they relied heavily on his research, supposedly. They wouldn't talk about the specific research because they try to hide everything, because the facts don't support what the government is doing with this deadly drug. And here is a comment that he had regarding the chemical abortion pill process. We are not going to give this method to women who are not able to understand what's going on. It's a very important several-step process. There are certain things that the doctors need to do to provide for the safety and welfare of the woman. Of course, the second patient is considered disposable, and the goal, of course, is to kill that child. While we're talking about women and RU46, we are not in any way diminishing the importance of the unborn child. He also said it is evident the use of RU46 as an abortifacient will require strict medical follow-up so that large-scale use will not lead to demedicalization of induced abortion. And that is exactly what the FDA has done over the years. They have made it a process where there is no physician involved. Women order medication from sketchy sources, and in many cases, there are no directions for how they are to use that medication, much less the warning of what could go wrong. And the average woman does not understand expected profuse bleeding with chemical abortion and when she's bleeding out. The symptoms of pain and bleeding are also those of ectopic pregnancy. So there was legislation passed in Georgia recently, the heartbeat bill that protects a baby once a heartbeat can be detected. A woman went in for an abortion and they did an ultrasound to determine where the baby was, and it was an ectopic pregnancy. Had that law not existed, that woman might have died from an untreated, undiagnosed ectopic pregnancy. So already we're seeing lives not only save the babies, but they're saving the women also. Now, there's some exciting developments on regarding RU46 in America, and I am thrilled to tell you about the highlights of this. There are plaintiffs who are suing the FDA for approving RU46 under political and sloppy conditions. They are the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, the American Association of Pro-Life OB-GYNs and Gynecologists, American College of Pediatricians, and the Christian Medical and Dental Associations. All absolutely sterling organizations and leaders. In addition, there were 4 pro-life doctors who also sued the FDA: Sean Jester, Regina Frost Clark, Tyler Johnson, and George Delgado, who is largely responsible for abortion pill reversal. And it would be wonderful to be able to tell you about that today, but time does not permit that. Now, they sued and it was appealed to the district court. The district court was overseen by Judge Kaczmarek, and then that is appealed to the appellate court. The appellate court represents a geographic location of America, and from there it's appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is the ultimate judicial authority in America. Now, Judge Kaczmarek had some interesting comments when he ruled on RU46, and he said that he ruled totally in favor of the plaintiffs, that RU46 should not be approved, it should not be mailed, and sent it back, sent the abortion industry on their knees. And let me share some of the comments he said. These are great. The court does not second guess FDA's decision-making lightly. That's a big deal to do so. But here, FDA acquiesced on its legitimate safety concerns in violation of its statutory duty, based on plainly unsound reasoning and studies that did not support its conclusions. As I mentioned earlier, they ignored the science for a political agenda. But now he also said, why did it take 2 decades for judicial review in federal court? Actually, 23 years to be exact. Simply put, FDA stonewalled judicial review until now. Before plaintiffs filed this case, FDA ignored their petitions for over 16 years, even though the law requires an agency respond within 180 days of receipt of the petition. You can see how they approved it for political reasons, and then they broke the law to protect it and keep it flowing, hurting women and killing babies. And then he also said, this I like because he has a heart for the women who are victimized with this drug. He said, women who have aborted a child, especially through chemical abortion drugs that necessitate the woman seeing her aborted child once it passes, often experience shame, regret, anxiety, depression, drug abuse, and suicidal thoughts because of the abortion. So this man deserves a gold star. In my opinion, I think he should be elevated to a higher court because of the way that he handled this. And of course, the lunacy on the left, oh, there's so much to say about that, but we only have an hour and a half, right, guys? The Washington Post, one of the bigger newspapers in this nation, those newspapers that still exist, called him, Kaczmarek, the worst federal judge in America and a zealot. You see, when they don't have an argument to their case, they attack the messengers, and they did so in full force. And then this paper had the gall to say that they claimed that chemical abortion was safer than Tylenol. Tylenol is a medicine widely used for headaches. I don't know if you have it here or it's under a different name, but it is absolutely ludicrous and irresponsible to say that. But the reason they're saying that is there's been a national cover-up. Since 2015, under the Obama administration, the FDA has told abortionists you don't need to report any complications of chemical abortion, no matter how severe they are, unless the woman dies. So if she gets sepsis, is in the hospital for 10, 11 days, has to have a hysterectomy to save her life, none of that is reported, only if the patient dies. So we're covering up 95% of the complications. Now, members of Congress are advocating lawlessness when it comes to this. Senators Ron Wyden, the Democrat of Oregon, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, we call her AOC, the Democrat from New York. She's particularly a visible member of the loony left. Members of Congress asked the Biden administration to blatantly ignore the rule of law and to blatantly ignore Judge Kaczmarek's ruling on chemical abortion. You know, since we have a room with physicians in it, I want to tell you that if you're ever looking to name a rash or something that won't go away, put AOC on the title of that disease, and you'd be making a good fit, I think. Now, of course, it was appealed. It was appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. What held some of his ruling was a 3-judge panel and voted 2-1. And they said that the chemical abortion pills will be available, but only up to 7 weeks, not 10. And very importantly, they cannot be dispensed by mail. So we prefer that they totally rescind the approval, but this is a huge victory in itself. Unfortunately, it was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court that ruled the status quo may continue as it works through the courts. So we're back to square one for the time being as it works through the courts. We are cautiously optimistic that we're going to make some substantial gains in this battle. So in the meantime, with the status quo, blue states have passed what we call shield laws. And blue states, we're talking about the liberal states, those that have competed with one another to see who could be the most pro-abortion in the wake of the Dobbs decision. These shield laws protect abortionists. They cannot be extradited if charged with a crime in another state for mailing these deadly drugs, say, into the state of Florida that protects most unborn children. There is no legal recourse against them. They cannot be investigated by in-state law enforcement, so they can basically do whatever they want and be shielded from law enforcement. There can be no civil lawsuits, including malpractice or wrongful death. If they butcher women, even to the point of taking their fertility, women cannot sue these back alley style abortionists because of the laws protecting them. We should be seeing feminists standing up and screaming at the top of their lungs about the injustice inflicted upon women with these shield laws. But because they are part of the extreme pro-abortion lobby, they're not saying anything. There can be no effect on their professional licenses. So if they turn out to be a hack abortionist in other states, the state could pull their license because they are a danger to society, not in these blue states. And there's no loss of malpractice or other professional insurance. So there you have it. As painful and unfair and unjust as that is to women. Now I wanted to introduce you to Tammy Morris, who is the other woman that I interviewed as she talks about her experience.
With the nurse and the doctor, they told me that the abortion pill was going to be a simple, mostly painless, private, safe process. It wasn't very long after I took that pill that I began to experience labor. And it didn't take long at all for those labor pains to intensify because I had already given birth to a child, my daughter. I knew what labor felt like, and I was shocked. I thought that I would cramp like I had with my surgical abortion, but that it would be over relatively quickly. This was not that. This was horrific. This was me alone, afraid, and feeling like I'm going to give birth to death. They didn't prepare me for this. They told me that some tissue would be expelled from me, much like clots. And I was on the toilet and I wasn't there very long, and the urge to push was there, and I felt a mass, and then I heard a sound. Horrified, I looked down, and there was my baby in a toilet.
How did you feel?
Devastated. This wasn't uterine tissue. This was a formed, recognizable, undeniable baby. My fiance's baby. I began to bleed profusely, more than the allowed or normal amount, and I did seek medical attention.
What were the weeks like after that?
I was angry. I was ashamed. I was very hard to be around because I had this secret. I had this traumatic experience that I couldn't share with anybody. And after all, how does a mother who killed her own child in the womb intentionally, how does she grieve outwardly?
That is what chemical abortion is doing to women. It's killing their children, and it is emotionally and physically maiming the mothers. And that is why Life Issues Institute is making it a priority to do all we can to stop the flow of these deadly drugs. Now, as I mentioned, we have a potential for a huge victory. A favorable ruling. SCOTUS is the Supreme Court of the United States. That's the acronym for our nation's highest court. It could have devastating impact on the abortion industry. And it could end the mailing of all the pills, which would be great. That would save babies in all of what we call the red states, where unborn babies are protected and their mothers. And it would require protections, it could require protections for women taking things back to the original approval. And ultimately, our goal, our primary goal, is to see that they rescind the FDA's lobbying political approval of RU46. Here's where I think we need to talk about the root cause of the problem. Now, one of Satan's favorite tools has been abortion to pull souls from Jesus. And as we reverse Roe v. Wade that allowed abortion throughout pregnancy for any reason, and we work state by state and battle to protect the unborn, Satan is under attack and he's fighting back. And we are feeling the brunt of that with domestic acts of terrorism and things that we'll get into in a minute. But we must be warriors of truth and justice. We must stand up for truth and for Tammy and Elizabeth and the other women. A good example of standing up for truth and justice is Pastor Jeremy. Now, normally I prefer a nicely trimmed beard, but I greatly admire your beard for the reason that you have it. So if you don't know that story, please pull him aside during the break and see how he's standing up for truth and justice. It's hard to fathom that you're in that situation and you have to make that stand. But we must, as Ephesians 6:11 says, we must put on the full armor of God so that we can take our stand against the devil's schemes. And then in Romans 8:31, it says, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? And isn't that the truth? But the next verse, 32, is very important. It wouldn't fit on this little slide here, and I want to read it. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? We can boldly go to the throne and ask God to bless our efforts, to give us strength, to give us courage, and give us perseverance as we stand up for the unborn. The title of this program is Roe is Dead, Now What? Now, what I wanted to put on the screen is Roe is dead, 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 but it wouldn't fit on the slide. I have been personally involved with reversing Roe for 48 years. And for those of us long-timers, It was a very sweet, sweet, sweet victory, but the job has just begun. We always knew it would, but it opened the door now for states to protect their unborn babies, and many are. I want to give you an idea of what's going on. Now, I want to take us back. Last year, do you know what I spoke about, anybody? Do you remember that? Shame on you. Well, I had to look it up too, so. Well, we talked about some of these quotes from the Supreme Court decision. The majority opinion by Justice Samuel Alito was all, there was no subjective line in the whole thing. It was all based upon the Constitution, solid bedrock stuff. The minority judges, all pro-abortion, avidly so, didn't have the Constitution on their side, so they got snarky about everything. And this is kind of one of their snarky comments, but I want to tell you, I totally, emphatically, joyfully, graciously, lovingly agree with these Supreme Court justices who are pro-abortion, because they said Mississippi and other states too knew exactly what they were doing in ginning up a new legal challenge to Roe and Casey. You better believe it, we did. We knew exactly what we were doing. The whole country should have known. I don't know why it would be a surprise to some of these justices of the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, here is a slide. I just love showing people this slide. This is from Time magazine. Used to be very, very popular magazine in the days of magazines. This one is dated, I believe, February of 2013. Its cover says, 40 years ago, abortion rights activists won an epic victory with Roe v. Wade. They've been losing ever since. Isn't that great? That is absolutely great. I like to steal a medical term from a thoracic surgeon after he's just completed a heart transplant. Woohoo! That is how we felt with the victory we had in But we can woohoo all we want, but that doesn't mean we still don't have to go. Pro-lifers spent decades getting things into place and into action for this reversal of Roe. It took almost 50 years in the making, but we did it. Now, we worked very hard to get Supreme Court justices, appellate judges, and district judges in place. Now, I've got to tell you, district judges and appellate judges are vitally important to the rule of law because they see thousands of cases every year, literally. The Supreme Court takes about 100 cases every year. So the rulings by the appellate and district judges are often the law of the land, and that's where it stays. So we have been busy working with presidents who are pro-life to get good judges in these slots. And in order to do that, of course, we have to elect a president that's pro-life, and we have to elect a majority of senators who are pro-life, because the president nominates all of these judges and justices, and the Supreme Court or the Senate confirms them. So there's a lot of pieces that have to be put into place for this victory. Now, what we did as part of the strategy is we arranged for a split court decision. Now, let me tell you what that is. For instance, in Florida, we passed a 15-week ban or protection for unborn babies. Mississippi did that. And other states did that. Well, the appellate court in one location said that's constitutional. The appellate court in another said it was unconstitutional. And when that happened, we were pleased, because when you have a split decision like that, that gives the U.S. Supreme Court a high level of motivation to take that case and rule on it so that there is not that division in the court system. That's what they did with the Supreme Court ruling on the Dobbs decision, which was a 15-week protection by Mississippi. And not only did they give us that, they kicked Roe to the curb. But I want to underscore the pro-life education undergirds all of these victories. It is the foundation on which we build political and legislative victories, quite literally. So everything that we do toward the politics and legislation, we cannot forget the pro-life education. Now, Donald Trump, whether you love him or hate him, there's a lot of emotion on both sides of him. He was the most pro-life president in our nation's history. We can lay the reversal of Roe v. Wade at the feet of this man because he nominated and the Senate confirmed 3 pro-life justices to the Supreme Court, which gave us enough to reverse Roe. And as a result, tens of thousands of babies are being born that would otherwise have been aborted in America. And through his short time in office of 4 years, we were funneling to him scores of appellate court and district court judges that we wanted to see there. And he put them on, and we were rejoicing as they were approved, one after the other. And the other side, it was so much fun. They just were beside themselves, lashing out against Trump, against the senators, anything pro-life and conservative. But you know what? There was nothing they could do about it. So we just worked as hard as we could because we knew our time was limited. We didn't know how much God would give us, but there was a lot of good ground made. Sadly, Biden has been appointing very bad judges to fill these positions. And here's something that was something important most people didn't know is that President Trump was looking for any and every opportunity to further the pro-life cause. We would meet with staff of the White House, and they were quick to make sure we understood that the latest idea that we were working on came directly from the president himself, not from the staff. So I believe his conversion to pro-life, a couple of years before he ran for president, he supported partial birth abortion. But when he was dating his current, which is now his current wife, she became pregnant. He wanted her to abort the baby. She refused. And now his son is the apple of his eye, and he understood what tragedy happens when you deny the love that is through an unborn child. He's been making some weird comments as of late about pro-life, so that's a whole other topic we could get into. Now, the aftermath of the Dobbs decision. I talked to you about how Satan is fighting back, and he's doing it with full force. It literally, quite literally, unleashed the gates of hell against pro-lifers and against our efforts in America. We have experienced fire bombings, vandalism, and other acts of violence, and they have gone almost entirely unpunished, while peaceful pro-life picketers are sentenced to years in prison. I want to briefly tell you that up in Michigan, a so-called pro-lifer lit a fire at a Planned Parenthood abortion facility. Within 4 days, he was arrested, and this happened in September, and by February, he was sentenced to prison. Now, he deserved everything he got. We do not support acts of criminal activity to support our cause. We don't need to do that. But when we went to the FBI and the Department of Justice, and we're not seeing anybody arrested for all of hundreds of things that are happening against us in pro-life churches, you know what the response was to us? They said, Well, this happened at dark and the surveillance camera really couldn't give us a clear indication of who did it. So what they've announced to the world, to the nation, of course, is to criminals, if you want to get by with criminal activity, just do it at night because we can't find out who you are. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's pathetic, is what it is. And the Department of Justice is simply not going after those who are breaking the law. And the peaceful pro-life picketers, some of which are my friends, are sitting in jail because they stood in the gap for unborn children. Again, we don't support illegal activity. We think it can be done legally. We think it can be done with a calm, rational voice. We think it can be persuasive from a scientific and medical point of view. We don't need to be radical. We don't need to be loud and obnoxious. We can be effective as we calmly and rationally share our point of view. You know, we have facts on our side. We don't need the noise and drama on this issue. We make more progress when we are calm and rational. Now here, there was actually an assassination attempt against a Supreme Court justice. Here's a description.
FBI investigators searched the California home of the man the FBI says traveled from there to Washington, D.C. to attack a Supreme Court justice. At about 1 o'clock Wednesday morning, police say a man dressed in black with a suitcase and a backpack got out of a taxi in front of the home of Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who lives in suburban Maryland. They say after spotting 2 federal marshals outside the house, he walked a block away and called 911.
He advised he's having suicidal and homicidal thoughts.
Police say he told them he came to kill the justice and was armed. While he was still on the phone with police, officers arrived and arrested him. Court documents identify him as Nicholas John Roski, age 26, of Simi Valley, California. They say he was carrying a handgun, ammunition, a knife, pepper spray, and burglary tools. Investigators say he told them he was upset that the Supreme Court might overturn Roe v. Wade and loosen gun laws, and that he planned to kill the justice and then himself. Attorney General Merrick Garland, who's a former federal judge himself, said he earlier took steps to increase security for the justices.
Threats of violence and actual violence against the justices, of course, strike at the heart of our democracy, and we will do everything we can to prevent them and to hold people who do them accountable.
Garland acted after protesters showed up at the homes of Kavanaugh and 2 other justices following the leak of a draft of the court's abortion ruling. Congress is now considering a bill to provide more money for securing the justices and their families, but last month's murder of a retired Wisconsin judge and the shooting attack at the home of a federal judge in New Jersey nearly 2 years ago that killed her son have prompted new calls for more security for judges, including a measure now before Congress that would block personal information about judges and their families from the internet. Investigators say that continues to be a concern. They say that Roski told him that he got the idea of coming to kill Justice Kavanaugh after finding the justice's home address on the internet. Roski has been charged with attempted murder of a federal judge. No comment from his lawyer, Savannah.
All right, Pete Williams, thank you very much.
Now, what's interesting about this, Secretary Garland sounded so concerned at me that he was on the top of this and going to make sure that judges are protected. Well, their radical pro-abortion picketers have been out in front of the homes of Supreme Court justices for months with megaphones and all kinds of things, and that directly is in violation of federal law to do so. And Secretary Garland is doing nothing. As a matter of fact, the White House came out and said that they support these people's right to free speech. It is also these radical people who posted the home address of a United States Supreme Court justice, which was an absolutely vile thing to do. And that is, of course, is how this justice's life was endangered, and probably that of his family. Now, we're also facing the lies and lawlessness from America's leaders in the wake of Roe. Let me preface this remark. During the presidential debate, my governor, Ron DeSantis, who's running for president, said that the Democrats support abortion until birth. And that is true. There's evidence of it because the Senate recently voted on a case that would do just that, and all of the Democrats voted for it. The Republicans voted against it. So they're on record. It's black and white. Yet the former White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, tweeted, or on the system that's now called X, no one supports abortion up until birth. Just utterly ridiculous. It's a bold-faced lie. Of course, the media does not challenge him on that, her on that. And then Kamala Harris, which is truly an embarrassment to our nation as vice president, when asked if Democrats support abortion until birth, she referred to that statement as ridiculous. It was ridiculous to say it was ridiculous. And then President Biden, well, what can we say about President Biden? He's so articulate, isn't he? He's a good communicator. He knows what's going on all the time. A man to be held in high esteem. Unfortunately, none of that is true. So I guess we can lie too, maybe. But here's something he said. I'm not big on abortion. He's the most pro-abortion president in our nation's history. I'm not big on abortion, but Roe got it right. The vast majority of religions have reached an agreement, and what he was referring to, an agreement that Roe got it right. Now, he claims to be a practicing Catholic. I don't know if we have any Catholics here, but I feel sorry for them that they have somebody standing up like that saying that their church supports abortion. They do not. And I was very pleased that some of the bishops in America stood up and said no. There have been those who are going to refuse him communion should he present himself at church. It's lies. Satan is the father of lies, and he's using those who promote abortion as his willing tools. Now, as I said in the last presentation, we saw the lawlessness presented from Senator Wyden and AOC. What can I say about her? She's just something else. Okay, let's look at abortion laws 1 year later, or about a year and a half actually, after the demise of Roe. State legislatures, some rushed to protect unborn babies and their parents from abortion, while others tried to compete to be the most pro-abortion state in the nation. And here are the results as of the time this map was made. It changes very frequently. Now, the red states are those states where abortion was stopped entirely. And I think there's about 15. Then the orange states are those that stopped most all abortions. Like in Florida, for instance, with our heartbeat law, most all abortions were stopped because if you can hear the heartbeat of a child, that child is safe in the womb. Now, the blue states are those who are extremely pro-abortion, even allowing infanticide, because when you allow abortion to be done up till birth, you get what is called a complication, and that is a live child, and it happens more frequently than anybody understands. And it has been reported and documented that abortionists have taken actions to kill babies who survive. In one case, it was twins. He put them in a metal dish and poured water, saline water, in there until it covered them up and they drowned. Others have been literally left on windowsills in the wintertime with the window open. Others have been left in a soiled laundry room to take hours to die. And this is now legal in many states because they've tucked in some wording that abortionists cannot be prosecuted by actions or inactions after a live baby is born. That's what they're talking about. Infanticide. Ohio, my wife and I lived there for 28 years before moving to Florida, 4 years or so ago. I say Ohio, I bring up Ohio because there is a referendum there to be voted on the first week of November that would destroy all of their pro-life laws that they've put together over years. And it would allow abortion until birth. Not only that, parents lose all authority or say-so in any medical procedure of their children, minor children. This includes abortion. It also includes sex change operations. So if a public school gets hold of a child and talks them into wanting to be the other sex, if this passes in Ohio, they could then secretly give them injections, hormone injections, and give them a surgical procedure to change their sex without the parents' knowledge or support. That is how extreme this is. Now, the problem is they have tens of millions of dollars. Soros is one of the sources of that money. And they come in at the last minute with slick ads that are lies and half truths. And they sweep in and they talk about anything that is not involved with the referendum. They hide what it is. They just couch it in reproductive justice and rights and things, but they don't really tell you what that means. And they often have carried the day because of the money and sophistication. There is a great deal of money being raised in Ohio to combat this. We're going to be tackling this issue when I return on our half-hour weekly radio program and the daily commentaries. We're also planning a project on social media to get the word out in Ohio about the reality of what this means. It would be devastating for this to pass in Ohio, and they are also working in the red states of Florida, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Iowa. So this is a serious problem. You can see that overturning Roe was not the end. It is just the beginning in many ways of very hard work. And I want to end the same way that we ended the other presentation as a reminder. Satan's fighting back. He's fighting back against you, against me, and against all that we're doing. But we can rest on the truth that we're standing for truth and justice. I tell people, don't think that God's on your side. He's not. God is on God's side. And we have to make sure that we are on God's side, not our own, because our sinful flesh will muck it up every time. So we can't be on our side. We have to be on God's side. And every day we have to do a soul check to make sure that that's where we are. Is what we're doing glorifying God? If we are, then we are going to be saving lives and God will bless it. Thank you very much for your attention.